Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you see a little button down below, or a little link down below, actually, and you click on it, you'll end up in Zoom. And if you'll see another little link, and you can click on it, and you'll end up in Mocana. And that's the part right there. See, did everyone see that? I just had to click the little thing. So anyway, if you and Mickey, the best thing to do is interrupt me before the show. Like if you see me getting ready, just remind me so I don't do it while I'm on air, because then it's a distraction. So anyway, you can jump into Mocana and ask questions and vote on questions and chat with each other. Also, we open the doors if you want to get in early. If you think you can answer the questions, come here at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's when we do mic checks. And once we've done the mic checks, that's how big the stuff will be, or the panel will be. We open the doors at 6 o'clock, and you can come in, hang out with us, and check your kit if you'd like to, or just talk. So that's kind of the setup there. We have general questions from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and then from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We usually deal with something specific that we think is important that we as a group pay attention to. Today, we're going to be talking about part 2 of our AWS. We've got a great team here. Chirag and Jeff and Tucker and Guy have been working on this kind of presentation for us to really understand how to build in the cloud, and we're pretty excited about that. So anyway, definitely stick around for that. Tomorrow is the long day. We have education first for a couple hours, and then at 10 o'clock we're doing Resolve. We're going to deal with audio in Resolve, so we're going to be dealing with that in this. So if you've got questions, by the way, if you've got questions, get them ready and get them in early in the morning, for the Fairlight page, so that the guys have a little time to think about it and put something together. Then at noon, we're going to do brainstorming. We've got Roger Wagner, who has built the Hyperduino. It's really a cool shield for the Arduino, and then he builds a lot of like how-tos on how to use it. And we're going to be working with Roger in a couple weeks, probably 5 or 6 weeks from now, but we're going to brainstorm, talk about the Hyperduino, talk about what he's doing, and brainstorm on what we'd like to learn about that. We're going to go back to Raspberry Pi for a little while after that, but we're going to kind of set this one up. We're starting now think 5-6 weeks out in advance. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our first question this morning comes from Graham Cardwell, who is in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And the question is, what's the best format and technique for preparing and sharing short video clips during a Zoom call? Currently, clips are sent to the host and they share their screen with participants. They're already quite heavily compressed, but we still suffer breakup. Is there a better way?
By breakup, you're probably talking about frame breakup. So losing frame rate. And when you screen share, standard screen share, you will see some breakup, because it's basically deciding you value resolution over frame rate. Go ahead, Chris, and then Peter.
Agreed. It could be that. It could be something else. Compression, whatever. I think the best way is to, if you're in a meeting, is to inject it into somebody's square as a webcam. So you could do it with a physical switcher, you could do it with a digital switcher, but basically what you're doing is you're using a virtual camera to replace your webcam with a window or a screen that is that video. The other way to do it is what we'll probably talk about later, where we talk about setting up instances of AWS where you can just keep a machine in the cloud that becomes your playback source.
Mm-hmm.
And
right,
it's plenty of ways to do it.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Peter.
This is a perfect use of Playout B and an A10 Mini, to be quite honest. And it's doing what Chris Fenwick was just saying, which is injected in as the camera straight into Zoom that way. Just switch it away and do it that way.
But you have to have some kind of input. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to play it out. And the problem with Playout B right now is that it tears a little bit. Well, so if you have something with a lot of high motion, you'll have a little bit of tearing. So it won't solve the problem that is specifically in the question at the moment.
Well, fair enough. And my other approach is I use Mimo Live a lot to do that.
Yeah.
To do it, inject the virtual camera that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Mimo Live, vMix, Mimo Live on the Mac, vMix on the PC are both great ones for that. Go ahead, Chris, and then Jeffrey.
One of the things I learned the hard way, and Jeff Francis helped me with this, is if you're using whatever device, whether it's another computer or an iPad or whatever going into the ATEM Mini, if you're changing your audio source, like from your microphone to the ATEM and back again, you automatically turn off original sound, and that messes the audio up, especially for a playback. So make sure original sound is turned on when you're playing back a video from that other source, and every time you switch your mic back and forth.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, same thing with video. If I go from here into something with video, that changes the resolution, that changes the audio and stuff like that. So make sure if you have one dedicated Zoom that does nothing but plays, you'll have a better job. And if that machine is connected to an Ethernet cable rather than the Wi-Fi, you'll also have a better job in delivering a better or smoother type video.
Guy and then Courtney.
Yeah, I would say for most teachers and normal people that don't have the higher resolution account, if you still just have a 360p account, it's screen share, but advanced. As long as you have the latest version of Zoom, you can do advanced and then choose the file, and that'll kick it up to 1280 by 720 and high frame rate. So it'll smoothly play at 30 frames a second. We like to push it in through these various devices, but that's because we have some of these bigger accounts or know the 720p portal or Amazon Echo Trick or Zoom Room or one of those. But for most people, it's going to be just the advanced version. So not regular screen share, you're going to get tearing, and you're going to get like 5 frames a second on a 1920 by 1080 video.
Yep. Courtney?
And if you're bringing it in via like an ATEM Mini as a video, just a regular video signal, the compression on Zoom is optimized for like a talking head where very little is moving. And if you do something like this, that's probably, now all those 9 videos which are being fed up there are all running at full frame rate on my end. But on your end, you're probably seeing about 3 frame rates, 3 frames per second. And that's just coming in off of as video on input 4 of the ATEM Mini. So the compression may be the cause of stuttering and slowdown if you've got a lot of activity in your video frame.
Yep, absolutely. John?
So I still haven't found the perfect solution for that. Doug and Chris and I did a soccer event where we had to step through frame by frame soccer footage, and the buttons are either too small or external devices I still don't like, and then having like a jog wheel to go backward and forward. I still don't think there's a perfect solution out there that I've seen yet. And I've tried MIDI, vMix, I've tried them all, and I still don't have the perfect solution.
Well, go ahead, Shrug. I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah. Just following on from what Guy was saying. So one thing that we've found is when you're using the share video feature within Zoom, 3 megabits per second seems to be the good sweet spot. If you have a bit rate that's 15, 16 megabit, it's going to buffer a lot. So 3 megabits seemed to be a really good sweet spot for us. So we had no buffering.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would say perfect solution, use a replay. So something that actually does replay, and then the buttons are perfect.
How much does replay? $3,000?
No, 20.
So a lesson. I'm actually going to come in under Jeff on my recommendation. For me, when I do playouts for events, and it's a single operator. If I'm not using Memo Live for a really small one, I might use a Memo Live to do some of those things. But when I'm doing them with hardware, and I'm not having a whole team work on it, I use the switcher and I use it into a hyperdeck. And in that hyperdeck, what it means is that when I cut to that source, it will start to play. I also, in those environments, I set up my audio to go through my camera. And this is the one time I use audio in my switcher. And the reason is because I'm super paranoid of talking over a show as the operator. And so what I do is I run it through the camera. I do audio follows video. When I cut to that video, it keeps me out of the show, and it plays the video straight into the ATEM, and that I have found to be perfectly clean. And if you want to do frame by frame, there is a JL Cooper controller for the hyperdeck, so you can actually it's a little controller that you can do frame by frame. You can do jog and shuttle. You can do all that stuff, and it'll talk straight to the hyperdeck, and it's less than a replay. Not as nice as a replay. I will say that. But if I was going to go to replay, I'd go all the way up to an EVS. All right. Next question.
Moving on, the next one comes from our friend Andy Coluccio of ZoomOSC and Washington, D.C., and says, we're working with Scarhoy to create some Zoom control hardware. Could the panel select 3 devices from their product ecosystem that would best benefit from a bidirectional connection to Zoom? I'll build a ZoomOSC raw panel integration for the selected devices.
Does anyone have any opinions about which Scarhoy? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Got a lot of opinions when it comes to Scarhoy. We love them. We sell them. We use them. Andy, I would say if you can work with Casper a little bit closer and don't try to go the raw panel route, because the raw panel route is going to make your work harder. If you could work with him to figure out a way to maybe get OSC to work or something like that to talk to yours, that would be a better route, because then you could use any panel, because they would have a core that would be applied to any panel. But some of the basic ones are the mini flies, for which would integrate some of the controls. The AirFly is definitely one of the more common ones too. But yeah, just try to find some of the bigger, the small pads, like the quick pads. They're great and all, but the problem with them is it's effectively just a fancier version of a Stream Deck. But I would work with them a little bit closer if you can, instead of, don't worry about rushing to market to get a raw version. So everybody understands a raw version is you're talking one-on-one with your API, your program, directly to the panel. The panel's then talking to your software. They're not using the core per se. And the core setup means that you actually can do different modules, different cores for different computers, or I'm sorry, different hardware, different devices. And then you could actually use one controller, and that's the beauty of the Scarhoy platform. I could use one controller to control cameras, to move my switcher, to change my router, to do all kinds of things that I want to do just on that one surface, instead of having to worry about multiple surfaces.
Anyone else? I lost my gallery there. If it were I, and I just had to pick three of them, I would probably look at the inline 22, the X-Point 48, and the Master Key series. So those are the 3 that I would probably focus on if I was going to pick 3. I do agree that having a generalized solution would be really great, but if you're picking 3 of them, those are the 3 that I would probably pick to control it. Next question.
We move to Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen, Germany. The best router, sub 500 euros, that can bond DSL and LTE to have failover when DSL fails.
It's the sub $500, euros that has us all stuck. Like I don't know of anything that does that. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jeff.
Yeah, well, Linksys makes a dual router, but it doesn't do LTE. You'd have to use another solution to bring the LTE in, I'm trying to think of the small routers, the portable routers that I can't think of right now. Slate is the 700.
Cradlepoint or Peplink. Cradlepoint or Peplink, and work your way down the list of.
Peplink has a little one. The thing is Peplink has a small bond unit, but it requires a head end that's a lot more expensive, if I remember correctly. So the end unit will be less expensive. You can get one for like $350, $400 US.
You can also deploy that head unit in your cloud and control that yourself.
I forgot about that. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Taylor, and then Tucker, and then Mickey.
Nighthawk also does one as well. They sell 2 versions. One is a failover version, and the other one, which is this one I have right here, has a single Ethernet port that you can plug into your existing infrastructure. So if you have a Cisco device, a SonicWall device, or even a FortiGate device, you can connect this into your existing infrastructure and just have that FortiGate or SonicWall fail it over.
Tucker, and then Mickey.
Yeah, the note in this price range is that most of the solutions that you're going to find are going to do a kind of a messy failover, and so your connections are going to have to reestablish. Anything that's a WAN IP specific is going to fail. Some things like that are going to happen. In the Peplink range, it's hard to find, and in their Peplink's lower price, the failover is not going to be clean. It's going to still be a dirty failover. when you get up into like the HD Max, session, the different HD series, you get into the Speed Fusion, and the Speed Fusion is where you have the node that's in your AWS instance or their cloud option, and that does a true bonding. You can lose one or multiple links, you can restore them, and your connection doesn't know the difference.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if you just need load balancing and failover, you can go. A lot of routers can do this. So assuming you already have a modem for both your DSL connection and also a separate modem for your LTE connection, you can just get a relatively affordable router from say TP-Link or a Netgear that can do load balancing or and failover.
That's great. Let's go to the next question.
Joshua Feingold of New York says the NFL signed a digital-only deal with Amazon for Thursday Night Football. Are the Amazon CDNs up to the task? That's the content distribution networks that Amazon runs. Do you think we will get personalized commercials, or will it just be the same program but digitized?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hands down, it's going to be personalized. Everything goes through a different path. It's always about getting content that is specific and targeted towards who's watching it. That's why whenever I actually use AT&T Now, used to be DirecTV Now, so I still have occasionally the non-regional commercials that come in, and I got to watch the cool little music play, or watch the little still with the cool music playing in the background, just like they do on ESPN3. So yeah, this is going to be very tailored and very targeted for that market.
Yeah, there's
and
no
if
reason
they're up to the course. Yeah, of course they are. They've been running them for years.
Yeah, they've been doing Thursday Night Football for a while. Now, they will have a higher view rate than they had before because all those broadcast viewers will be watching watching Amazon. I will say that the first year was, I think they did it, they've done it for 2 or 3 years, and the first year was pretty rough. It was a lot of breakup, and there was a lot of figuring things out. By last year, I think it looked better than broadcast. Because I think in some of the cases they were sourcing, I don't know if it was all the games, but I know in some of the games I was watching specifically because they were sourcing 4K. And 4K is not a place that regular broadcast may go ever because they don't have the infrastructure to do it. It's easier for them to do things like move to HDR than 4K. But the Amazon stream looked better than broadcast by a long shot. Looked clearer, almost 3D. It was amazing. So I think that they're going to do really well. Obviously, this sets up for the next. What happens is what you want to watch are as these contracts come up, they have expiration dates. I don't remember when they all are, but MLB, NBA, and NFL all have different years where the contracts come up. This is a shot over the bow of broadcasters possibly losing exclusive rights or any rights to sports. This is I think this will most likely is about to end. And I don't think that they can compete. I don't think the broadcasters for the most part can compete with Apple and Amazon and some of the other ones. And so I think that they're going to have a really hard time, and it's going to be a really good payday for the sports organizations because they're going to get a huge check. But I think that it's going to be bigger than any other sale ever because it's the one thing that brings people in live, consistently, other than office hours, of course, but we're a little smaller as far as our viewership. Go ahead, Bill.
It's been a while, but I can see it's going to be interesting for the production community because Target adds into a large national buy. This is probably going to mean that if you're in Green Bay, obviously you want Packers merchandise, but if you're in a different NFL market, you want different merchandise. And I remember looking very heavily at Final Cut when I was learning it and wondering what roles is good for. And when I realized that you could do graphic swap out automatically in there, this is one of those things where I'm going, ooh, this would be really nice to be able to create a spot and then have it substitute 20 different teams in there automatically while I'm getting coffee.
Scary version is no ads on Amazon Prime only. That's the scary version because it's actually, it will destroy the model, because, and that's, I don't know if Amazon's ready for that, but that's the scary version for broadcasters because once you see it, a football game without ads, there'll be a whole lot of why are we watching this? I already have the problem. I start every football game 20 minutes late because I can't watch them. I just can't sit through the ads anymore. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I've seen this on Spotify because I was in Burbank listening to my account, but it had my Seattle address and a zip code. So I'm getting, roofing ads from Everett, Washington while I'm down in Studio City. So that localization often has to do with how are you connected with that service.
Yep,
And
right
if
there.
your eyeballs are at home, that makes sense. If you're at a sports bar, if we go back to that kind of model, then I can see them doing those rotating ad inserts in those kind of circumstances all the time.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know about, I've been a cord cutter for years, long time, of course. And so I don't know about the ad thing though, because we actually have had some content on Prime overseas for tennis, and it was actually ad supported still. And I know in a lot of my choices, I will pay a little bit more to have the ad free, but even then there were some programs that still ran with an ad. So you still had, it was like due to, I think it was a Star Trek series, I think is what it was, that always ran with an ad before and after. But I don't know if they're going to completely figure out that offset between that monthly, yearly subscription. The yearly subscription is worth offsetting the content of the ads and how much money that brings to it.
Yep. No, I'm saying I don't know. That's the scary version because once you create a culture not used to watching ads, like my kids can't watch ads. Like they've never seen them regularly, ever in their whole life. And so when you don't see them and when you're not conditioned to have those breaks or whatever, it's just not acceptable. So I think that the next generation isn't going to be that interested. Go ahead, Paul, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, for Jeff Kethley, you said you're a cord cutter. How do you get mainstream TV like NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, et cetera? How do you do that if you've completely cut the cord?
It's available. It's there. It's on AT&T now. It's there. And then also they have these things called antennas. They're like this metal thing that you put up in the air, and you have to move them back and forth sometimes, and then it brings it down into the TV.
Oh my gosh, I learned something new today.
And for me,
antennas.
What I will say is that, like, for me, YouTube Live, or tv.youtube.com has been, I pay good money for it. It's $75 a month or something like that. And I use it for research because it's the one place I can easily grab examples. So if I want to look at where super sources or where lower thirds are this week or this month or this quarter, I'm recording every live broadcast all over that YouTube supports all the time. The DVR is set all the time, to all these. I just keep on adding them to my list. And then I just go through them all and just scan through and grab frames of what I'm interested in looking at. And so I watch live television maybe once a week for something, but it's very rare. Even the shows that I watch, Sunday morning discussion, political shows or whatever, I would never watch them live because then I would have to watch through all that stuff. I just find the panel discussion and move on. Like, I don't care about the other stuff that they're doing. Jeffrey and then Courtney.
Hulu is the one that does the ad before and after. I've seen that. It's actually very rare, but we watched something a week ago that did that. NFL Network is still going to air certain Thursday night games. And then thirdly, I have a feeling the ads are going to go into either product placement or what they've been doing with the ads. And that's just basically been this side by side. You're watching the action while something plays on the other side or a ticker or something like that. I think that's where they're going to go with continuing with advertising.
The tricky thing that there will be kind of a tricky situation when it comes to antitrust and other things like that. But you now have one of the largest retailers with a huge live stream. The ability to attach clickable ads becomes real, like super real when you see this. So being able to have ads, those ads can be taking you straight to Amazon.com, to buy them. And I think that's going to be really compelling. Courtney and then Bill.
And to Paul's point, Lowcast is a nonprofit. It's available on most Roku, Amazon Fire, those kind of platforms for streaming. That it's available in most major metropolitan cities. That takes all of your local broadcasts and puts them on the web. It does include the commercials though, and it's free. And so far, they haven't been sued out of existence by the broadcasters, although they're trying. But because it's a nonprofit, it makes it through a loophole in the rebroadcast laws.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Taylor.
when cable was first coming up, a lot of the governing bodies in the areas where they were stringing cable had laws that required must carry of local stations. Their thinking was that, okay, if there's a flood in our area, people are going to want that local information. So I think there's a lot of resonance of those old things saying, yes, you're a national provider, and yes, you're looking into the local market, but you must serve the local market with local information at some point.
But that's for cable, and I don't know if they're going to find a way to do that with online, especially given the fact that we just go to dark sky and see that it's raining. Go ahead, Taylor.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that I agree. This is a shot over the bow. This is gonna be a trend. I also think that there's also another trend where these services are integrating other services. For example, on Amazon Prime, you can get multiple channels, NBA, NFL, etc. Also within YouTube TV, you can get the MLB out of market games. So I think there's definitely a trend here.
I think that probably this decade we'll stop seeing broadcast carrying major sports. I think that's probably the trajectory. I don't think they can afford to compete. Next question.
TJ Asher of Minneapolis is in with you. YouTube made adjustments to their copyright tools yesterday to help users check for copyright violations. Discuss. And he has a Google link to the story.
And I think specifically this is for uploads, not live. Obviously, it's hard to test those things, but I think it's great. It takes some of those. A lot of us would do exactly what YouTube's telling you can avoid now, which is that we'd upload it as unlisted and then watch it and see whether we get tagged or not, and then put it out. And so this is a much better way to do that. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And the cooler thing is it's a couple less steps when you are uploading a video. There was one step that you basically had to say, check a box that said, no, there isn't anything in there that could be considered copyright or considered hate speech or considered expletive, and they've done away with that. So it's a more streamlined process for content creators to upload video.
Next question.
Sky Gleason is interested in the topic of outdoor video production. Other than the tarp and pop-up tents we're installing, what recommendations would the group have to protect all the electronics, cast, and crew?
All right, go ahead, Michael.
Get a trailer or a real tent. Never, ever, ever go with a pop-up tent. I've actually seen those things flip over and catch somebody right in the face, right here, just right below their eye. I mean, those are one of the most dangerous things on the planet. I would find some way to convert a trailer, something, anything besides that.
Good. George, and then Tucker, and then Jeff.
By all means, keep your power off the ground because you will have major issues if it rains.
Tucker.
Make friends with your local National Guard. They have fantastic tents and fantastic structures. When we do stuff with the Boy Scouts, we do National Guard tents, and they're awesome.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Rent a storage van or a U-Haul type thing is what a lot of common people will do. Put it all in there, and always use a UPS. A adequate UPS that can handle things, because your power will flash. And if you're using a generator, use an inverter, not just a standard loud generator. Use an inverter so that the power is clean as possible also.
Go ahead, Bill.
Having worked most of my career in Arizona, I would also say that another often misthought of problem with campers and things like that is just sunshine. There's not a rig that I ever bought that I didn't create a black umbrella holder that I could take during the summer and literally position it over the camera to keep direct sunshine from hitting the camera, overheating it, and causing warping with accessories and stuff like that. So if you don't live in a really hot area, you don't think about that. But it was a big deal for me.
Yeah, that's not my problem. But thank you.
I know in Seattle that's not, but we have a wider audience.
Yeah, I'll just show you. So this is why you don't keep the
oh dear
on. So this, I was like, hey, let's not go through the water here. Let's not step into the water. And they were like, I said, because that's 400. That's 400 running right here. And they said 400 volts, and I was like, no, that's 400 amps. that's underwater. That was Charlotte in 2012, and there was a lot of production there. So anyway, yeah, don't keep the power under the water. No one died.
It's typically okay, but just on the off chance. I mean,
yeah, no,
any joints like that, if
Yeah.
you can't lift your whole cable up off the ground, at least any connection joints like that, get a cable bridge and get them up out of the water.
Yep, no,
Very
absolutely. And
helpful. Thank you all.
we will almost always build in, unless it's just we are in the middle of nowhere. If we're in the middle of nowhere, to everyone else's point, we use like a Winnebago, a trailer, a small van. Another thing is a moving van. Works really well, like a U-Haul. We've definitely used where we just, it's $19 a day. You're not putting very many miles on it, or $20 a day.
I do have access to a conversion, one of the like the Amazon conversion vans. So
so
that's great advice for the control room.
Yeah, you can
That
put
would be great.
that we've definitely used Ford Transits, as well as even we have used caravans, Dodge Caravans, but it's pretty crunchy to be in there. But the one that we've been the most successful with is like a 10-foot or 14-foot U-Haul.
Yeah, we're in a neighborhood, so that's again all these fun things that you
moving van.
You don't have to. You don't have to do when you're only in a small kitchen with two people. But
to them it's just a moving van though. Hey, we just got a moving van. We pull it into the garage and run cables out. So
it's old Seattle, tiny little roads.
Yeah, those will work in all the roads. I mean, they're not giant vans. They're little trucks. They're designed to work in little roads. Go ahead, Tucker.
If you do the back of a truck thing, make sure you have at least some kind of fan to get some circulation, because those things heat up and get real muggy real fast.
Yep,
absolutely. And if it's cold out or hot or super hot out, a window unit in the door really helps.
Next question.
Eric Hall, Mount Vernon, Washington says, what's the best way to get camera control to a Blackmagic Micro Studio 4K camera using an ATEM Mini Pro ISO? And he says, sorry, this may not be an appropriate question for this hour. No, I think
it is. It's very appropriate.
Yeah.
Not only that, I have that around somewhere. Here it is. This is what you want. See if I can cut to it really quickly here. Sorry, I should have read ahead. But this is what you want here. So that is the SDI to HDMI bidirectional. So it's got HDMI in and out. It's got SDI in and out, and it will take that camera data with it. So that is the solution, unless someone else has a better one. And they're not very expensive. They're like $50 each. Go ahead, Jeff.
Scarhoy. Scarhoy has a great box that does the same thing. It's very similar to that, but you could talk to it from anywhere. So he didn't really make it clear whether or not they want to go long distance remote control or just local. But Scarhoy has a box that basically it imitates an ATEM. So you can send
interesting.
The same data.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Courtney.
Is that the one that applies a LUT as well, Alex?
I don't know. I don't know if Guy has that answer. I haven't.
I don't think it does. I think it just.
I think this is
passes
just
that control.
raw. Yeah, it's just raw. It just passes the control. It was just a quick solution, which it's useful. Next question.
Eddie Martinez of Sacramento is next. Within a workflow with a one-to-one Zoom meeting for talent, which is then brought into a larger Zoom meeting with the primary audience, how is chat connected between the disparate Zoom meetings? Is this the impetus behind Mukana?
It's not the impetus, but Mukana is pretty useful for it. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, it's typically we wind up doing a screen scrape of just that section. So a region of interest screen scrape and take that over to show it to the other people. But there's not a great way to tie those chats together. The other thing is just have them join the other meeting from a second device. Make sure that they do not join audio. So make sure they're disconnected from audio, and then having them, be in chat in the other meeting, but also be in your production pipeline.
Yeah, if you're trying to pull just chat comments in, what Mukana allows us to do is to have all the comments and all the questions be shared by everybody in every room, which is nice. If you're trying to if they're in separate ones and you're trying to just take those chats and feed them to a host or to a social desk, we find that just cutting and pasting out of Zoom into something like Google Docs works really well. As opposed, you can get it a lot more complex things, but that tends to just kind of work. Go ahead, Mickey.
And to Alex's point, it's also most likely a good idea to have some sort of filter, a human filter, to make sure your presenters aren't seeing something that they might not want to see mid-show.
Well, and not only that, you should never have the presenters go. I mean, so I'm of the opinion that the presenters should never look directly at the feed. Now we do it here because we don't have a very high volume and we're kind of used to it. But I don't look at the questions very rare. It's very rare for me to look at the questions before Bill asks them because I'm in the conversation with all of you. And so you want to have, everything should be about the host being present. You know, like, so where the screens are and how you talk to them and how you interact with them, it's all them being present with the show. It's you as you're working on those, you want to reduce the number of commas that the presenter has. And that's why, as we move to the new YouTube, thing, whichever, I know everybody's waiting and I keep on talking about it, but we're really close now, is that then I don't have to deal with the whole startup at the beginning, which creates a lot of commas. If you want to see a lot of commas, look at me in the beginning of the show, of me trying to do a whole bunch of things all at the same time. So that's what you want to get rid of I think it's a huge mistake when we see people trying to have the live host going through questions. Is a horrible, horrible idea. like the worst idea. You always want a social desk. You always want someone passing them the questions, and let them, do it, and don't have them trying to think and talk at the same time. So social desk is great. A person that goes, hey, hey, Bill, what questions do we have? Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. All right, next question.
It comes from Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham, Washington. Needing to order a couple of webcams for office coworkers. Budget dictates getting Logitech 900 series, but which one? There are so many. The C920, the C922, 930E, 960, 9000. Where should I look?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, my favorite Logitech, I know there's the Brio. I have a Brio. I have a 920, but the one I like the best is the BCC 950. It's a PTZ webcam. It has a remote control. It's you can pan, tilt, zoom, do everything. It also has a speakerphone that's really good. So that's my recommendation.
I don't know if I'd have speakerphone and really good in the same sentence, but go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, it's, and I'm not sure if this is true nowadays because I haven't hooked up a Logitech onto a Mac, but I question whether it's going to be a PC or a Mac because certain Logitech cameras don't work fully on a Mac desktop rather than a PC. If it's PC, you should be able to use any of those brands or models.
Yeah, so the I actually don't know what the 920, the main difference between the 922 and the 9. I think that the 922 is a slightly upgraded version of the 920. So I don't think that that's that big of a deal. They have the same field of view, which is still a little wide. So the 922 has a slightly, it has better frame rate or potentially better frame rate. But I would go with the 9. Our go-to is the 920. The 930 has a much wider field of view. Well, 12 degrees. So the 930 is 90 degrees as opposed to 78 degrees. My preference for a webcam is about 55 degrees, which was what the Cisco Precision HD had, which was perfect. The Precision HD is still one of the best webcams to be made. It doesn't work with the Mac anymore. There's some kind of issue with it, but it was 720 only, but it was a 1-inch chip. It was a 1-inch chip 10 years ago that was doing 55 degree, to that chip. It's amazing. Like, it was the best. And we bought 20 of them, and I wish I had kept them because when COVID hit, they were selling for $1,000 each. There you go. The downfall of the Precision HD was that it, number one, is a 720, and number two is it didn't have a mount. So we had to print mounts for them so that we could, there's nothing on the bottom of it. So, but still one of the best webcams ever made. Now, it was like $300 or $400 when it came out. But the 920 is kind of our go-to at that price range. The Stream Cam is the other one that's there. Now, the 950, the BCC 950 that Paul brought up is outside of the price range that you stated. So that's like, it's like $300, and it's I'm assuming that when you say 920s, you're talking 150 or below. So 150 or below would be a Stream Cam, which is also Logitech, which does look better than the 920 or the 920. But the 930 I would not use for a person. for a conference room, it works pretty well because of the wide angle. Next question.
Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland is up next. With anyone had a chance to try out the new Rode Wireless Go 2 2-channel, 2.4 gigahertz wireless mic system yet?
Have you tried it, Guy?
Guy?
Have you
I
tested it?
tried it the reverse way, which is using it for in-ears. And the discussion we had the other day was how do you get mono versus stereo? So you can do, in post left, right, or channel 1, channel 2. And it does do that. So you can select, there's a button on it. So far, so good. I've used the original ones a lot, and we went almost a full football field with the original ones. And the beauty of this one is that it records. So if you do go beyond that football field distance, you can still capture that audio, which is fantastic. I'm not sure how they got around that Zaxcom patent, because I thought that was something that you couldn't do. So I haven't tried that, but I will try it and report back next week.
Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila says, I got my ATEM Mini Extreme ISO today. While I am relatively comfortable using the ATEM, would the panel be up for a second hour or Saturday training on ATEM features, upstream keys, downstream keys, superstore DVEs, macros, and so forth?
Let's plan on that. Yeah, someone put it in the second hour, and we'll plan on it. But I think a Saturday afternoon workshop is the right way to go, rather than trying to even fit it into an hour. We just kind of get. I'd like to do it in a week or two. We want to give people a little more time to get it, but a lot of them are applicable no matter what switcher you have. But let's go ahead and we've got. Again, we're going to be mixing up some Raspberry Pi stuff as well as some other stuff as we get ready for the Arduino one. But yeah, let's plan on a workshop where we just kind of fiddle with the ATEM and talk through it.
Can these be recorded recorded
Yeah,
sessions?
they're all recorded.
Even the after hours? That you,
No, it's not an after
second hour.
hours.
Sorry.
It'll just be a second hour. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Next question.
David Brady in New York says, Zoom question. When running Zoom calls or webinars, our team will usually feed a deck in on a video channel. When switching from a spotlit deck to 2-up speaker view and the next slide, the deck displays the previous slide for a second before switching. Any ideas? And he's trying to determine if it's Zoom or the RTMP stream. Happy to show an example in the post show. That's David Brady.
Oh, I know what that is. That's the so what Zoom does, there's a moment when it switches that there is a 200 millisecond gap, right? So there's, it's 200 milliseconds behind and it has to go up. What Zoom does, what Hangouts or what Meet did, or Hangouts did, and I think Meet still does, is it takes your preview window and it just immediately gives it to you, and then it scales it up. So it goes if you watch old Hangouts, you'll see the soft to sharp, soft to sharp, soft to sharp. What Zoom does is it takes the last high-res frame it had from that source and it puts it up for a second, and then it goes to the live source. And what it's doing is it's filling in that 150 to 200 millisecond gap with something, and that something is the last high-res frame that it had. And I've never thought about it with slides, but you're right. That would be a horrible thing. Like it would, if you're spotlighting back and forth, you would get this. If you're spotlighting, it shouldn't do it if you have a 2-up. But if you're switching anything, it will do that. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one thing that we should test on this is pinning somebody up with a Zoom room or just a second machine. And that way the person's already ramped up at full resolution, so it doesn't have to go back. I think that once you're pinned, right. I notice it in the gallery. If somebody's pinned, they're high resolution in the gallery even the whole time, because that's the signal that's coming in.
That's a great test. Yeah. So if somebody pins it, or if you pin it on another computer, theoretically it might make that go away. But it's funny, you see it, you'll see a glitch when someone is coming up from nowhere. But yeah, you're right. If you're switching back and forth, you'll see it. And if you're not switching back and forth, you won't see it. And that's because it's adding that frame in. And to Guy's suggestion, I bet you that will work. If someone else is pinning it, it means that the reflector has the file or has the image. Go ahead, Michael.
Is there a way to set any kind of a static shot that it would?
No, because it's.
I understand the switching part. Okay.
No, but it's the last frame that it had, so it'll always be different. Yep. Next question.
Moving on, Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, I'm thinking about writing a grant for a cargo trailer and 8x20, 7-foot tall to build out into a mobile recording studio. Other than sound isolation being tricky, any examples of the panel would be proud to share?
Good, Tucker.
Talk to Jeff, 1F Jeff. He does this.
And the other thing to look at is if you just want to get ideas, MarkerTech sells these pre-done for you. It will save you. One of Jeff builds them. I think I haven't had him build them, but we bought a 24-foot MarkerTech trailer and we used it every week. And it was, now we tore it out because of the way the tables were set up. We went to IKEA and bought bigger tables for the two back tables. We actually made them larger, and then we mounted monitors all the way down the side and rebuilt the lighting system. But other than that, it was the same. We put a 3-phase 100 amp, distro in it, which made it much more useful. So anyway, it's MarkerTech has built shells to do that, and they work pretty well. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Paul.
Yeah, with something like this, for sure if it's an audio recording studio, for sure your booth is going to be tiny. So don't even think about putting a window in there, because a window in that small of a space you'll have a lot of early reflections for that.
Well, and if you're doing a recording studio, that even those trailers could be a little bit small. You may want to also think about, we had to build a chamber, or had to design a chamber and we used I think it was a 18-foot truck, like a full-on box truck, 18 feet, or maybe a 16-foot truck, because it gave us a lot more space to work with. And then it was easier to kind of float the space inside of it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one of your biggest problems is going to be HVAC, because you don't want an air conditioner on the roof that's making a lot of noise, and you might have to have a separate unit that's taken off board when you park it, and brings your air in over tubes, because that's going to be the biggest problem with something that's lightweight like a trailer, and and no windows. You're going to have to heat it and cool it somehow.
Let's go on to the next question.
Moving to Andy Dolph of Durham, New Hampshire. What little thing did Alex need to click at the top of the show? I'm amazed people watch such small details of what we do here.
So the process of starting the show is I have to start the there's a bunch of clicks that have to happen. Now, if I remember correctly, I do the right thing, which is to make Mickey host before the show, which I often forget as I'm doing the last little bits. And then I need to I start the YouTube. And then what it does is it spawns a new page, and then I go into the page to hit start live. But about 50% of the time, YouTube pops up with the audio going in, which I hear from the computer. And so the problem I get into is that suddenly YouTube Live is feeding into I'm hearing myself like 12 seconds behind. And so I have to mute it real quick. And so, and then half the time it doesn't happen. So you have to kind of organize things so that I can see it and hear it. And I would fix this if I did more complex routing out of YouTube. The problem is that I kind of leave from past issues, not with Zoom, but with Hangouts, I always leave my audio to my ear is the raw input from the computer. And the reason I do that is so that if everything falls apart, I can still hear what's going on. I've had issues where I had complex routing coming out of my computer, and then something goes wrong in the hardware or the software, and suddenly I can't hear what's going on, and I can't talk into it, and I can't. And so I always use default audio out when I'm in a show, just because I don't want to personally, when I'm doing it by myself. When we have other people, we do all kinds of things, but by myself, I always leave it that way so that I can make sure that I can still hear the show. So anyway, that's the long and the short of it of what I have to manage there. Next question.
Marius van Zyl of Johannesburg, South Africa says, would you suggest iPhone 11 Pros as cameras? We have enough of them for Zoom via an ATEM Mini Pro, or should we be sticking with dedicated solutions? Small studio setup, will quality be good enough for streaming over Zoom and YouTube?
I've actually I've been experimenting with, I have a bunch of iPhone 12s actually, but they would work well. I've been experimenting with that, and I actually think that they're pretty good little cameras. I think that I would, using especially something like, let's see if I can find it. I got this camera. This doesn't have it on it. The Filmic Pro is really the best way to get an output out of it. So, I'll show you. I'm gonna try to show you this example really quickly here. Let's see if it pops up fast. There we go. So if I go to, this is the 12, kind of doing a show, and it's a pretty clear image as far as, looking through it. I think that it's a very acceptable image, and this is using the Filmic Pro clean output. And the cool thing about Filmic Pro is that you can control it from another camera. So you can have a remote controlling the Filmic Pro. So as far as like zooming and everything else, it works pretty well. The one thing I will say is don't get any of those silly cables that are cheaper than the Apple converter. You are in hell if you don't use this converter. This is an HDMI with a lightning into the camera. And I have gone through so many cables trying to find a better way to do this. This is the solution, Sky.
And make sure you plug that in. I used that yesterday and could not figure out why I was not getting signal. The electricity, that is. You must, at least for me, I had really, well,
No,
lucky you.
Mine will just pop right in. Your battery will die eventually, but mine will work without the power.
Well, I had a 25-foot cable. I don't know if that needed.
That might be.
Maybe that was it. Also, just out of curiosity, do you set your Filmic Pro to 30? And I also discovered, ask me how I know, locking your aspect ratio so that when you frame something and then put it back up out of your reach, it doesn't flip vertical on you.
I always
it's a great tool. That's a great tool.
I generally operate everything at 30 frames a second. So it's set to 30. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jeff, real quick. We're moving fast.
So I've done tests with all the way down to 7. They all have great video quality. The 11 and 12, if you have the 11 Pro Max and the 12s, they have the camera stabilization options in there, so you'll be able to use them. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just actually did an event a couple weeks ago with a little online company thing, and they used 12 of the iPad Pros. And the idea was to be able to get those as contributors. The idea was to be able to get their 1080p out. They didn't read the specs 100%. The front-facing camera only gives 720p apparently through Skype, not 1080p. So that's another factor to always factor in, is like, which side are you using? Because it's so easy to use that front-facing camera.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Sam Greenwood of Toronto, Canada says, did any of you watch the SMPTE Hollywood event about TikTok last night? If so, what did you think?
I missed it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I think I'm way too old to be on TikTok. Yeah, most of it just went. I went. These kids consider this entertainment, huh? That was my take. But it was interesting to have young people, and they did talk a bit about the technology used to create the TikToks and how it's changing or democratizing production, for a large group of people.
Yep. A lot of good TikTok out there, but you have to watch it for a little while to let it learn what you want to see and for you to learn what the style is. But it's a pretty fun platform, and it's really taught a lot of people how to be really concise, which I like. Like there's a really interesting model there. I think that because TikTok has live, I think one of the things that a lot of these creators could do, especially the ones that are doing how-to, there's some great ones on gardening and cooking and everything else. They could do the same thing where they say, hey, I do a TikTok on a 1-minute thing on how to cook something. And then they say, we're going to do a live at this date, that is, that we're actually going to do that thing together. If it actually works. I think a lot of TikToks you find that the recipes don't actually work. They just look nice. Next question.
Graham Caldwell of Belfast, Northern Ireland is back within a church setting. What's the best way to add our camera and audio feed from the sanctuary into a Zoom meeting? The purpose is interaction between the church building and remote viewers.
I think we might need to know more about your pipeline, but go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, definitely. It's like that question is really broad, and I think you will get the answer to that after a couple of weeks of watching Office Hours or joining the panel.
Yeah, and welcome, by the way. I think this is the first day we've seen your questions, and we're glad to have you here. One thing I would say is that sanctuaries are challenging because most sanctuaries are pretty roomy. So you just have to be careful of, how much, it depends on the type of church, but a lot of sanctuaries tend to have a lot of reverberance. And so you want to think about a headset mic, in my opinion, for that, just because if they're going to really talk to the audience, as you move that mic away, depending on the kind of room you have, you're going to get a lot to deal with. The other thing is an IFB is really useful for a wireless mic with a wireless IFB. And what I would say is that inside of the kind of what you're doing, the thing that is the most convenient for the user is something like a Shure Microflex, because you have IFB return as well as the microphone input all in the same box. And so it's really easy to administer. It's not the cheapest solution, but I'm just going to give you what I think is the most convenient solution for what you're doing there. So now you have a headset and an IFB, and what I'm assuming is that your minister is actually wants to talk to the audience and have a conversation with them. And then at that point, I would consider some kind of large TV, 65 inch, 60 inch, something like that they can see, over there, depending on, and it can be off to the side if you have people in the room, in the actual area. Or one of the things that we've done, one of the things we've done in a similar situation is that there is a kind of a fireside chat that happens right after the event, and with just the online audience. Then you roll it in, and you let them interact. Anyway, it's a couple thoughts there. Next question. We're gonna go real quick.
TJ Worrell of Minneapolis says, is there a Mac-based digital audio workstation that will see more than one USB microphone input? I have a client that would like the ability to conduct impromptu interviews, recording both sides of the conversation. He doesn't want to carry a hardware mixer. So I guess the question is, does Core Audio in the Mac allow you to plug two microphones into two USB ports and route them separately into a recorder?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know of a ADW that would allow you to do that, but you can create an aggregate audio device in audio MIDI setup in OS 10. But I've had mixed results for that.
And even something like would Loopback do that? You could theoretically grab two devices on Loopback. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, you can do that in Loopback.
Yeah, the issue that you'll probably run into in most situations is that the clock between the two are not going to be quite exact, and so you wind up with clicks and pops and things. As far as the doesn't want to carry a hardware mixer, if he's already going to be carrying a couple of microphones, I would say something like the Rode Podcaster or Alan Heath Z, the smaller Z series that exposes each microphone as a single, will get you you'll save all the money and frustration of carrying it in frustration of dealing with a kind of odd setup.
Next question. Sorry, we're running out of time.
Andy Dolph of Durham, New Hampshire. Seems like the Logitech StreamCam and Brio are in the similar price range. Which one do you prefer, and for what situation?
The only reason you buy the 920 is because it's less expensive. When it's less expensive than the Brio. The 920, when not under COVID pressure, is $80. Under COVID pressure, it's $150, so it looks a lot closer to the Brio. The Brio is typically $199. There's no reason to buy a 920 over a Brio if you have the money to buy a Brio. It's a much better camera and typically more expensive. Go ahead, John, real quick.
He's saying the Logitech StreamCam, Alex.
Oh, StreamCam?
Yeah. And I think the difference there is the StreamCam is only 1080p and the Brio's 4K.
Yeah, I missed that. Still same. I would still say Brio is what I'd get over anything else in that price range. The StreamCam is cute, and it you can turn it any direction, and there's a bunch of other little things. But I would normally just go with the Brio. Next question.
Paul Edison Lamb has our final question in the general grouping. Has anyone had success with the keying in? Even with a green screen and good lighting, it seems terrible.
I'm afraid I opened it up and just didn't like the entire premise. So I just immediately turned it off. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the only problem is you're doing an app on top of an app, and that's where it's gonna really start to fail.
Slides are a horrible idea. Like slides with lots of text. I know people want that and they want to sit themselves on top of that. You can go to slides as an illustration. Showing picture illustrations of something is a good idea. Slides, the way that they're normally used with lots of text and little things that you want to go down, is a horrible idea. And putting you over top of it is just putting lipstick on a pig. Anyway, not that I have an opinion about it. I just hate, I have to stream these and I just hate them. Anyway, all right. So now we're switching gears. So what do you guys want to do? We have an enormous number of questions, like most ever for a second hour. So do you want to start with some questions, or do you want to jump into doing an overview first? Go ahead, Tucker.
I would love to start with questions that pertain to last week. So that might be a little bit of moderation on the way in, and then head into the demo and then come out of the demo into questions.
How long is your demo?
It's not all that long, 20 minutes maybe.
Well, let's do, how about, can we just do like, it's going to be hard for us to figure out what was before, back and forward. Let's just my request is let's go ahead and answer questions for like 10 minutes or 15 minutes and then do the demo and then go back to answering more questions. I think it'll be hard for us to sort them in real time.
Might I make a suggestion is why don't we just go ahead and we've actually prepped some of these questions in advance. Why don't we just go ahead and roll through them instead of waiting for Bill to read them to us, since we know half of them that are already there?
Sure. It creates kind of this in between of us managing it. I'd rather just have Bill read them because it's just one person reading all the questions, and then you guys can answer them. I'm a little, sometimes I get a little obsessed with drawing inside the lines. Anyway, so let's go ahead and fire off a bunch of these questions, and then we'll go into the demo. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, the highest rated is Guy's question. What is a vCPU and how many do I need to run in vMix in the cloud?
Okay, go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, I'm going to screen share real quick if you want to see this. Screen one, share. Cool. So on the left side here, we've got on-demand pricing. So this is in AWS. And if you look here, each of the instance types has a certain number of vCPUs. And so
these are virtual CPUs, right?
Yep, virtual CPUs. It's CPU cores, basically. And so let's go down to our G instances. I'm going to scroll. And when we get to the G instances, we'll see the G instances come in at like G4DN extra large is 4 vCPUs. The instance that we used to build last week is the 4XL, and the 4 extra large is 16 vCPUs. So if you're making vCPU requests, make sure you're making them in, either 8, 16, 24, 32. That's the way that you would typically want to make those requests. For most people, 32 vCPUs is enough to get to playing.
And you're saying that 96 with 768 gigs of RAM is probably overkill?
No, it actually doesn't
help. If you're
help.
going to get 96, you're going to get 384 gigs of RAM.
No, there's one at the top. There's one at the top that's 768 gigs of RAM. And I was like, I just want to try that for an hour just to see what happens. Anyway, all right.
Take the Ferrari around the block, right?
Exactly. All right. Next question.
Roger Manche or Manch?
Oh, sorry, Chirag, did you have something to add there?
Oh, no. I was just going to say in the chat, I've just added a limit calculator. So you can basically type in all of the instances you need, and it'll tell you exactly how many vCPUs you need.
Oh, that's great. Next question.
Yeah.
Okay. Roger, who I just mentioned in Como, Italy, said, setup, can I use the same key pairs across different regions? And if so, is this recommended?
Go ahead, Tucker.
You can import key pairs into various different regions. I would recommend against doing that. You get at least a little bit of security by having them independent. So,
next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, how do I get my local camera into the cloud?
So local camera into the cloud.
Stay around for the demo later.
Okay. All right. We'll demo that. Next question.
Daniel Goldstein, Washington, D.C. How do I have multiple EC2 instances sending and receiving NDI and other local traffic as if they were all on a local area network? And he's got a link there to Makana, PC Labs. And sorry about the hyperlink in the middle. I'm not sure how it happened. Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
All right. Go ahead, Tucker.
Next week. This week, we're talking about how to get sources into AWS. Next week, we're going to be talking about NDI inside of the same VPC, which is the virtual private cloud. It's your virtual network inside of AWS. So that is what we will be hitting very hard next week.
Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes in Bronx, New York says, what's the difference between a launch instance and a start instance on the right-click menu in the AWS console?
Go ahead, Tucker.
Launch instance is I want to build a new instance. That is, I'm going to build something from scratch or from an AMI. Start instance is I want to actually boot the machine. Start is pushing the power button.
Next question.
Yeah, the next question is Jeffrey Reyes again about sticking point I had was naming things. Are there any best practices or pitfalls to consider when naming your instance, naming the PEM file, naming of security groups, naming your Windows machine, and do any of these things affect the other?
Go ahead, Jeff.
For the most part, it's about your organization and how you, just like your own computer and your own network and that sort, except for whenever you're deploying multiple AMIs or multiple machines, virtual machines, you want to be able to strip out and do a reset using the Amazon tools, especially, or if you're using AWS, do a reset so that the name of the machine that you start automatically increments or changes its name. Because if you end up with, say, just for instance, 150 machines that are all using the same exact machine name, your NDI workflow doesn't do well. Just for instance, in case it happens.
and try to stay away from final. All right, next question.
A couple from one from Chirig here on the panel from Dallas, and he says, "What is the G in G4DN, and why do I need to use G instances?"
Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
Those are GPU instances. They have NVIDIA GPUs or the AMD GPUs. Yeah,
graphics.
And
they
do take a little bit to acquire. So those are the things you don't want to try to do the day before the event. Chirag?
And just to add to that, some questions we got in the cloud production Discord was, do we need to use G instances for other ingest? And we'll cover that next week, but the answer is yes, we will need to use a lot of G instances.
Yep. Next question.
Jeff Keithley here from Texas says, "Tucker, why not just turn off the internal Windows firewall?" Is this a plant question?
Maybe.
We'll go over firewalls here in just a few minutes. And when we do that, there's pros and cons to each workflow. I tend to like to show the more secure workflow. So,
next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C. here on the panel says, "What are the best hardware options for getting SRT in and down from the cloud? Kiloview, BirdDog, or Haivision?"
Jeff?
What fits your budget? What needs you have, and then what fits your budget. My hands down, everybody pretty much agrees that the Haivision is the best when it comes to getting SRT into any infrastructure.
And this is a Makito?
Makito, yeah. Hands down, any broadcaster is going to say that's the one. Right behind that, those what I have on my desk is the Matrox. The Monarch Edge is a very powerful platform also. It does 10-bit, and it's a fraction of the cost. Well, it's 10 grand versus 15-ish grand of the Haivision. It's a 4-channel module also, so it does 4 channels up. But then you look down into like the Kiloviews, then yeah, you're getting down to sub $1,000. There's also the Versa Streamer does it. Intinor somewhere around the 10 grand range. There's a slew of them out there, but it really depends. There's no one all be all for everybody, because it depends on how many channels you're trying to do, and then also does that budget hit where you need it to be too.
Next question.
Roger's back from Cuomo, Italy with this. "Testing with 4G DN.2X large instance in AWS's Paris region. A speed test on fast.com turned out with 130 megabits per second download and 640 megabits per second upload. Latency 90 milliseconds unloaded, 92 loaded. The DL download speed seems very low for a cloud instance. Also, the latency seems way too high. Suggestion to troubleshoot this."
Tucker, the Jeff?
I would try a couple of different speed test methods. Fast uses, I believe it's Netflix's servers, and it's probably, you may check and see with, like I said, one of the many other speed test functions, because after running Fast last week, I ran a test right after the show with another tester and got significantly higher responses.
With those numbers that he quoted there, I would almost venture to say you opened up the wrong browser, that you may have been testing your local connection versus your cloud connection. But that's definitely way off.
Next question.
Chirag is back from Dallas with, "What's the difference between shutting down and terminating an instance on AWS?"
Go ahead, Chirag. Chirag threw the ball, then he ran down the field and he caught it. Yeah, exactly. It's like, go ahead.
Guy's the master of that. So shutting down is like turning off your laptop for the night. And terminating is totally deleting it, destroying it to never come back.
Go ahead, George.
Can I just add to that real quick? You want to make sure that if you really have important instances, you go ahead and turn on the do not, you just make it so it doesn't terminate automatically or accidentally. So there's a feature in the instance to do that, just in case.
You go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, whenever you provision your instance, if you're creating a new instance and you think that you may want to protect yourself from that, it is in that creation where we had all those options. One of them was termination protection, and it basically just forces you to go through an extra like 2 steps to delete the instance.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jeff.
terminating it is throwing the laptop in the river.
In the trash can, light it on fire. There is a way though that you could right click on the instance and go back and choose the termination protection and turn it on there too. You do not have to do it when you start. I actually just recently ran into a client that accidentally deleted a $5,000 piece of software system, and we had to do a major restart, rebuild, and everything like that. And it was just somebody got a little extra clicky happy, and away it went.
Next question.
Roger, again from Cuomo, Italy, says some AMIs, Teradici and NICE, are not available for the AWS Milan region. Can I clone an instance created in another region, for example, Paris, with my desired AMI so that I would have my instance in the Milan region, or is there some kind of licensing problem with doing this?
Go ahead, Jeff.
It's more about hardware availability. That's the biggest thing. Hardware availability in certain regions. Bahrain, which is one of my larger clients, is in. We tapped out their region with an available G instances. They basically cannot request hardly any more than they're using 50 to 60 machines. So we had to move them over to Mumbai because that's where the next place. But in that same Bahrain, the Teradici is not available probably due to international licensing issues at that point. But that definitely Teradici is not available everywhere, and that's probably something you're running into, Roger, that you may have to work around and just have to use a different alternative for control.
Next question.
TJ Worrell in Minneapolis. What's the best practice? Is it better to change the clocks on the EC2 instances to match local time, or leave them as they boot?
Tucker?
If you're relying, one, I think it's good to go ahead and change them to your local time, but also pay attention if you're using anything like in vMix, if we're using their GT titler to pull a clock, just know it's going to pull the clock from your instance. So you need to pay attention. It's typically going to be whatever the time that is appropriate for the event you're doing is. That's what I would change it to.
Next question.
Alex Lelignowitz from Toronto. Could you show how to attach the vMix instance to a virtual private connection so that we can add more machines and have an external IP address?
Go ahead, Tucker.
So every machine is by default attached to your default VPC. You can create additional VPCs. I honestly haven't found a reason to do that yet. As far as machine getting an external IP address, they all get an external IP address by default. You can use elastic IPs to get a static IP address assigned to it, but by default, everything that you're asking for there happens.
Go ahead, Jeff.
There's definitely IP redirectors like freemyip.com. I'll put that in, and it's free. And so freemyip.com allows you to put a little link into the easiest way on the Windows machine is you put it in a browser. The browser go put that in your startup menu or your startup sequence. It goes out, says to the to the FreeMyIP website, says, hey, this is my IP address today when I started. And then you just use that redirector URL and that goes back into it. So you might be like, call it my vMix machine at freemyip.com always will go to that machine that's going out and making the call out. You can use the elastic IPs, and as far as other VPCs, we have one that's just for development and another one that's just for production. So it kind of depends. Again, it's organizational what you need to do.
Next question.
Mike Graham in Larchmont, New York says, assuming 8 vMix calls, a PowerPoint desktop capture via NDI, 4 additional WebRTC calls coming in from neural nets live to air, and send all that into a Zoom webinar using Companion and ZoomOSC, what would be the AWS instance requirements? And postscript, which apps would go on a separate instance of AWS?
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Tucker.
Again, this is where you get into what works for you. Tucker and I have probably 2 different ways. The way he set it up last week is not a way I would set it up because I would split apart things, split apart responsibilities. I just, from a broadcast background, I'd rather have one piece fail than the whole piece fail. So whenever you're talking about that arrangement, Mike, I would definitely suggest breaking that up, just so everybody understands what Alex said about turning up the volume to like a 96 virtual CPU. it does not help vMix, because vMix will basically only use resources at an 8x at most. And then after that, it's a law of diminishing returns. You're just throwing money away. So stay with lower count or higher count machines at lower vCPUs. That's going to be more effective in the long term to be able to do.
Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, in the situation that you're describing, I would determine what your tech responsibilities need to be and then divide your system that way. Typically, I feel if you want to have your vMix calls managed independently, which I usually recommend, then you have a vMix instance that's handling vMix calls and feeding them over to your primary switching instance via NDI. That way you, again, the responsibilities are segregated, and if there's an issue with vMix call, you can deal with that. One person can deal with that, not reaching over the top of the guy that's switching the show. So I would separate that. The PowerPoint desktop capture, I would separate that into an individual instance. Let's see, WebRTC calls, that's probably going to be direct to your primary switching instance. Let's see, and send it to Zoom. Yeah, this is kind of the difference between Jeff and I's thoughts as far as I feel comfortable letting my primary switching instance feed directly into Zoom, but you could also do that independently.
Next question.
Mark Harder, Bedford Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. How do you restart the Windows machine on the server without having to relog in via PCoIP? Going into the Windows restart takes me to the PCoIP login. Is that the way things work?
It is the way things work.
Next question.
Mark Harder, again, is back with probably not a great idea, but is it possible for the Windows server in the cloud to see the webcam on the local Macintosh computer? Because my friends not only let me use them, they help me.
We'll cover that one in this. We typically, there are certain remote connection options that do allow for a local webcam to get passed directly through. I highly recommend against that because it's kind of a secondary thought for that workflow. It's not going to be protected very well. So I would typically join it as either like a vMix call or basically get your camera into the instance in a remote contribution way.
Next question.
Greg Gibson, Washington. What's the best way to monitor a live feed in the cloud? I typically see a lot of latency in the virtual terminal on my local machine, and it's hard to gauge audio sync.
Jeff?
It depends on your tool set, of course, but you want to get something fast. If you're talking about the live feed, meaning like that's the thing is, Greg, are you talking about the actual feed from the machine itself? Then Teradici is probably the best out there. TGX is another one by Multidyne, but that's just the monitors you see on the screen. But if you're talking about the actual feed, the output itself, then just a standard browser seeing that RTMP output reflection coming back. We use tools on the Sienna stack that basically allows us to see it near real time. So we're going through our Sienna processing engine that's coming back to us in their proprietary format. And it's a very, very low latency and broadcast quality. So it just depends on your tool stack a little bit, but also it depends on what you're trying to achieve too.
Go ahead, Tucker.
Another option is to use SRT to bring basically a confidence feed back into your facility. You will take the little bit of latency hit on that, but that will be a broadcast quality. This is what my output is. It'll give you the best audio video sync. Everything's going to look really, really good. So I would recommend that.
I generally, this is the one thing with streaming, I look at either a laptop, an iPad, or an iPhone and look at the end stream that's going to go out to everybody. And that's the only way I judge whether I'm in sync or not, because there's so many places in between, including the encoding process, that can have the sync slide, that I want to see the last thing that what everyone else is going to see in that test to know that I'm actually looking at the truth. Next question.
Mitch Jacobson in New York says, my instances won't connect. SSM agent seems to be the default for the Windows server I chose. So it may be an incomplete session manager or IAM instance profile. What are the best options and how can I make this connection work?
I go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the session manager in this situation. I would go ahead and it is the default. They're basically showing you their product first. Click over to RDP, download the RDP file. If you're still having trouble connecting to the instance, then I would consider checking your security group which we'll talk about here in just a moment, and just validate that that RDP is part of the security group that allows that connection.
Next question.
Mark Harder of Seattle. How far apart are the AWS CPUs from the GPUs in the data center racks? Care to speculate?
Go ahead, Tucker.
Same rack.
Yeah. Next question. Very, very close. Very close to each other.
Taylor Sonderhouse in Cincinnati says, did Teradici use the same network port as RDP, port 3389?
Go ahead, Tucker.
No, it does not. We'll look at that here in just a moment.
Last question before we go into
one. We got through them all. Taylor Sonderhouse in Cincinnati says, can more than one person be connected into the same computer with Teradici?
And Jeff?
That is definitely one disadvantage of it. So we use Teradici for the primary person and then TeamViewer for the secondary, third, fourth, however many people need to talk to it.
Yeah, Tucker.
Cool. Thanks.
If you truly need multiple people logged in, I think Churig has one of the best solutions, which is using Parsec. Parsec allows multiple people to log in at the same time. Be aware you can't see each other's mouse, so make sure that you're like truly hands off if there's somebody operating.
That's great. All right. No question left behind. We got those handled. So great work, guys. And let's go ahead and jump into your presentation, Tucker. Is it Tucker? Is this your? Yep. Go ahead.
All right. So we're going to jump in, and this one's going to be quite a bit more laid back. We don't have to speed through it. So we'll step through one by one. Let me make sure I've got all of my data in front of me. It is okay. Here comes a screen share. There it is. All right. So what we have is I'm now logged in, and I'm going to go ahead and boot my instance, which I've already done. It is running. I'm actually logged into it, so we're looking at this view inside of the instance. So what we're going to look at is today we're going to bring some remote feeds into this vMix session. So this could be Guardian apps. It could be I think OBS. There's a couple of different things that we could use to capture these feeds, but in this situation we are going to use vMix. So the first thing that you would do if you were wanting to bring these feeds in is you'd come in and you'd create a new input. When we create that new input, we're going to select stream/SRT. I'm going to come down here and select SRT listener. Now there's three connection types with SRT. There's caller, listener, and rendezvous. Rendezvous is a problem solver in case you can't basically open up ports in the firewall. So typically we won't use rendezvous. Caller is the machine that is on the side that you don't have firewall access, or it's the one that's harder to make adjustments on the firewall. This is your remote site. Listener is typically the one where you are able to open up firewall ports. So because AWS is what it is, and we have very, very good access to the public IP address, there's very little infrastructure between you and the outside world. We will be the listener there. Now, this is completely independent of the direction of the video feed and audio feed. So listener, caller has nothing to do with the direction. Be aware of that. So I'm going to set it up as a listener. I'm personally going to use port 9000 as the receive port for this one. I'm going to set my latency to 400 milliseconds just as a starting point. That's a pretty safe one for most places in the US to start. You can tune it down and make it faster. You can tune it up and make it slower to make it more stable. So there we go. That's the only thing we need to enter here. Going to hit OK. So we've got that one. I'm going to actually create several here. So I'm going to add another input. I'm going to go back to SRT. I'm going to just select the one that I just created, and I'm just going to modify the port to 9002. In the SRT spec, they do recommend that you separate by one, basically go every two. Okay, I'm going to do this a few times. And what we're going to do is I'm going to create a link called a Grove link, which is from Larix Broadcaster from SoftVellum. And I'm going to send that link. I'm actually going to do it on the back end because I don't want a bunch of people jumping in. But I'll show you how that works in just one moment. 9006, 9008. And Jeff, how many do you have that you're going to feed me today?
I'm working on 4.
Okay. 6, 8. 10. Okay. So we've got multiples there. I'm also going to add another input that's going to be a vMix call, and that'll be another way. So whenever we're working with remote, SRT is going to be a little bit slower than a WebRTC. So the vMix call will be the fastest link. And that's going to be how, if you're going to have a conversation take place, you'll want to use something along those lines. Let's see. So I'm going to go over to Larix Grove. And in Larix Grove, if you go here, softvelum.com/Larix/Grove, it builds up the links that you need with all of the arguments. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to drop my IP address, SRT:// my IP address with the port, and it's going to create a QR code. And this is actually not the IP of this machine. So if you try to connect to this, it's not going to do anything. But that is one way to get people joined in if they're using the Larix Broadcaster app, which is a super easy way to get someone in. But this is the actual link that someone would need that they could use as well. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go, and I've already sent this link over to Guy and Churig and Jeff. And if you guys try to connect, let me know if you're able to. Or let me know once you have. You are.
Working on mine still.
Okay. That's actually a surprise to me. I must have forgotten to undo some things that I did in the rehearsal. So while we go through this, they are connecting via SRT. We've got all of these feeds already up. I'm going to show you the workflow of exactly how to make these feeds function. So I'm going to come over here, and one of the things that we need is we need a firewall rule that allows it through the Windows firewall. We also need a security group that allows it in, because the security group is our, yep, I did already create it. Okay, so the SRT inbound security group that I've created here, let me show you. On the left side, we're going to go down to network and security groups. We click that, and we get our various security groups for this particular data center. And my SRT inbound security group, I'm going to go ahead and create a copy of it. So I'm going to create a security group. I'm going to call this SRT inbound 2. And we would put a good description of saying allows SRT inbound. So inbound rules is the one that matters. The outbound is already set and it's already applied elsewhere, so we don't really need to worry about that. But here we're going to actually say this is a custom UDP rule. I'm going to say it's port 9000 through 9100. And I'm going to say that the source for this can be anywhere. That basically means that anyone that wants to connect to this instance can connect from anywhere in the world. If we wanted to make this more secure, then we would need to get the public IP address for whoever's connecting to you. And we would come here, and instead of saying anywhere, we would say custom. And we would actually type it as in the format that's listed down here with 0.0.0/32. The /32 means that one IP address and that one IP address only. So let's pretend we wanted to accept it from Google. We would do 8.8.8.8/32. That's going to be the most secure way to set this up if you want to set this up very, very secure. In this case, we are just going to go with the full open. Alternatively, if it was going to be connected from my location, let's say I'm at a studio and I want to connect, I would use the my IP function, and it's going to pull the IP in there with the correct filter. So that is creating the security group. Once the security group's created, we have to attach it to the virtual machine. And to attach it, what we would do is we would come down, and under network and security, we would go to network interfaces. And this is because we only have one machine. We know that this network interface is the actual network card for that virtual machine. So we would want to come in here and select this network interface, select actions, and come down to change security groups. So if I come here and say change security groups, I see what's already applied to that instance. If I remove SRT inbound and save that, right off the bat, I've lost the video feed from them. if I reset these, like they're basically, you notice they're all frozen. If I reset them, if they were actually transmitting, it would immediately reestablish. So we're basically broken now. So I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to go from my instance. I'm going to select security and just check it to validate. Security groups, there's only one security group, and it's the Teradici access one. So I'm going to go through that process again of attaching it. I go to my security groups, go to the one that I just created. I'm going to hit actions. Sorry, not security groups. Network interfaces. Select the interface, actions, change security groups, select here, select my inbound, add it, save it, and we'll start reestablishing.
Tucker, you might want to point out also that you can go to the instances that in your instance list, and you can right click on the actual instance and change your security group live there. And that is, you could do this live. You don't have to shut down anything, but it basically gives you a shortcut back to where you were going without having to go through other menus. So very easy to swap around and like open up a specific set of ports without necessarily committing to it, to that interface all the time. You could juggle them around pretty easy there. And you can stack multiple security groups on top of each other. It's not just one to rule them all. And did you give them the shortcut that we talked about for the inside, the VPC of that specific line?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So next week, whenever we get into actually transferring NDI around inside of the infrastructure, we do need a rule that allows traffic in that same section. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create another security group. I'm going to call this allow local, and this is going to be allow local traffic from this group. Okay. And in this situation, I'm actually going to create the rule without an inbound, and then I'm going to come back to it, and I'll show you why that is. I'm working at a different scale than I normally do, and it's got me off a little bit because I'm trying to make this large for you all. So I created the security group. I'm going to go ahead and name it allow local. I'm going to go back into it. So right click, nope, actions, and we're going to edit inbound rules. And I'm going to add a rule that is all traffic. So all traffic, and we're going to say from, we're not going to say anywhere because that would be dangerous. We're going to do a custom. We're going to select in the search box. If we scroll down, we actually get a list of, we could enter an IP address in a subnet. We can also just enter a security group, and we're going to say allow from, where's my allow local? So basically what I'm going to say is anyone that is inside of this security group that I'm editing right now can communicate all traffic with anyone else that's inside this security group. So the benefit of that is that if I add this instance to that security group, where's my allow local? There it is. Add, save. Any other machine that is joined to that same security group will be able to communicate, at least at the security group level, with each other. That's going to come into play next week. We'll revisit. Okay.
Yeah, just to back up a little bit for the guys watching that want to do this with Zoom, that's what we're going to be getting to, because that's kind of the exciting thing right now for a lot of folks, is being able to bring in pinned people. And so that's what we'll be talking about here next week. But be aware that SRT is just one way, Zoom's another way. Jeff will be piping in some more SRT feeds. I have my Elemental here. I could pipe in stuff through the Elemental via RTMP. So there's a lot of different ways to get stuff in. And I guess we'll also be looking at vMix call here in a sec. Who's going to be calling in? Is Jared going to call in on that one?
He's got the link. You've got the link. Feel free to jump in, either of you, here in just a minute. So I want to talk about the Windows FireWall real quick. We need to poke a hole in the Windows FireWall to make this function as well. So let's go and talk about that. Let's see. I'm going to go into the firewall. So you notice earlier Jeff asked about disabling the firewall. Some people do disable the firewall and just basically allow any communication to come in that way and use the security group to define your level of security there. I like to have both in place. And in this situation, we would come into the firewall, we would hit advanced settings, we would go to inbound rules, and we would need to create a new rule. This is going to be a custom rule. I'm going to move down and say protocols and ports. Let's see. We're going to do UDP. And in this situation, the firewall has established this link and it has allowed it. Typically, I would go ahead and create a specific port rule. 9000 through 9100. I'm going to do the same thing here. Specific ports, 9000 through 9100. That's basically saying that on my local machine, it can access these ports. On the remote coming inbound, it's going to allow access via those ports, which basically means it's going to be a one-to-one. We're going to come through. We're going to say which local IP addresses. I'm actually going to just say anyone and anyone in this case. And allow the connection. Profile, I'm going to let it apply to all. I'm going to name it. This is going to be SRT inbound. So it's the second layer that we would need to create. This basically, your mileage may vary if you don't have that firewall rule in place. It's a good best practice to go ahead and create that. When we get into allowing NDI in the local, we're going to create a second rule here that's just in prep for next week. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new rule. This is going to be custom. This is going to be all programs, any protocol, all ports, and we're only going to allow access for our local subnet, which let's find that real quick. IP, come on, IP config space / all. I'm going to find my default gateway because it's going to be the first address inside my subnet. And so that's 172.31.16.1. And then my subnet mask is 255.255.240.0, which that's known as a /20. And the other kind of the two ways you can write that is it's a /20 or 255.255.240/0. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually put the address that we had, 172.31.16.1. 172.31.16. I'm actually going to put a 0 because that's the official start address of that space. I'm going to do a /20. Okay. I'm do the same thing here.
And Tucker's being really, really secure here. A lot of us will just turn it off. I think, Jeff, what's your vote? And George and Jurek, do you guys just turn off? I know
if it's
Tucker,
in my VPC, if it's in my VPC, the chances of somebody going through my security groups to get to that, because my security groups are now secure on the outside. There's only a few open ports. I don't worry about it. I turn off the internal machine firewalls. It's just
I definitely appreciate Tucker's going deep in here, but for a lot of us, we just go right to that Windows Defender firewall and turn off for the.
So I'm not alone. Is that what you're saying? Thank you.
Well,
guys.
and the only thing I'll say about that is that when you're getting started, absolutely you can turn that off and move forward. It's not a bad practice to just get into the habit of being secure, because then you know how to do it, and you know what. Because here's what we get into is people suddenly turn all the security up because you're now doing a really high secure event. You know, I had a spat last 3 or 4 months last year where we were potentially under the attack of state actors, and so we're worried about everything that's connected to everything, and what happens is you turn up all those notches to get to that high secure, and then things start breaking because you didn't realize, oh, this is going to cut this off, and this is going to cut this off, and this is going to cut this off, and then your events become more difficult at the very beginning. And so by slowly turning that dial all the way up and getting used to the muscle memory of just doing it, like Tucker's walking us through it, but I'm sure this doesn't take very long for Tucker to do on a day-to-day basis. Getting used to it and knowing how it behaves is something that you learn over a long period of time. And then when you do grow into a position where you may be under attack, it's not a new thing for you. So that's the only thing I'd say.
And keep in mind, this is all you can replicate every bit of this because it's in AMI. It's an Amazon machine image. So you could just make a copy of this. Once you have it secure, to this point, you
Right.
can make a copy of it, and then all the rest of yours are done. So,
So it's worth knowing. I'm really glad that Tucker's walking us through it at least, so that we can see. You know, to your point, a lot of people will turn it off, but it's really good to know that it's there and know why you'd want to use it. And I would, as I was practicing, I would keep on turning those dials up. When I get started, I turn them off, and then when I'm practicing and actually doing even smaller events, I'd use those as opportunities to get good at it.
Do your protocol research also. Make sure you understand all the ports that are required for the various protocols you use, because there's a lot of things like SIP, for example, has an initiation port that it uses, and then it has audio transport ports that they use. I mean, understand the protocols that you're using in the systems you're using them in, so that you know how to effectively apply these. Because a lot of people wave their hands and give up on firewalls and say, I'm just going to open it up and do the unsecure thing, because they don't do the research on that, and the troubleshooting gets really difficult. So this specific one I want to remind is that I'm setting up the companion firewall rule to the security group that I just created that allows all inbound access. So this is in preparation for NDI later. So I basically said all traffic inside of the local subnet that is used on these machines, on all of these machines, is going to be allowed, and I'm going to apply it to all the different domain, private, and public firewall policies. And I'm going to say next. I'm going to go ahead and name this allow local, but let me do it better. Allow local. Okay. So that firewall rule exists. That's going to be important for next week. One of the reasons that I do that also is that if you go through the process of disabling the firewall, you'll either be disabling all of them or you'll disable one of them. If you only disable one, and then for some reason your network connection on the machine establishes in, let's say, the public policy, you're now in another firewall section that is maybe active where you disabled the private one. So anyways, something to consider. We've created those. We've established our video connections. I skipped over the section of the video that we shouldn't see, so we're good there. And that is contribution into the instance. These could be RTMP feeds. They could be, I mean, there's a bunch of different feed types that they could be, but it's really that easy to get them in. Right now, let's look at what our actual latency is. So I'm going to go down here in the lower right-hand corner, and I'm going to hit the colored bars there, and I'm going to click SRT, and this is going to actually show me I've got these links established. They have this amount of bandwidth utilization. It looks like it's varying between 9 megabits per second down to about 2 megabits per second. Packet loss percentage, as you're tuning your feeds coming into AWS, you want to pay attention to your packet loss. If it's SRT, if it's not SRT, it's a little bit more difficult to see these values, but making sure that you're below 5% packet loss, you'll be in really good shape. You can withstand up to 20% packet loss if your latency is long enough. Whenever you're tuning an SRT feed, I would recommend that you establish a connection at what you consider safe, which again, 400 milliseconds is a good safe starting point. Look at your round trip time listed here, and I do 4 times the round trip time as a good, solid, stable value for the latency settings inside of SRT. If you're really trying to tune it, you can do 2 times. It's just you may get some tearing and breakup. Cool.
And then there are some cameras like the Panasonic UE150 that are SRT native, so it'll just kick that stream all the way straight up. No in between, no encoder, well, the encoder is built into the camera, so be aware that some of this is pretty technical. Once you get that IP address, you can just push it right up, and it's pretty simple. So.
Or throw down boxes like George brought up earlier, so like the Kiloviews, which is very inexpensive, under $1,000 encoder type box that you basically just program and put it behind any camera, and you get SRT to where you're going with its latency, of course. The WebRTC is what they're using for the vMix call. Shirag, were you able not to hit that?
Guy, I think Guy was going to hit vMix call.
Oh, sorry. I'll go ahead and dial.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that'd be great, because Guy has an SRT coming in on one feed, and we could see the latency difference between the vMix call and SRT. And next week we'll do another latency test, and we'll show you some of our Sienna tools also and how they differ.
Yep. So that's really, I mean, that is bringing feeds in. It's very straightforward. The main thing that gets people caught is not having the security group created, not having the Windows firewall set up appropriately. That's basically it. I think questions would be great at this point.
Yep. Do we? I think we have a couple.
Yeah, we
Bill,
have
are you
a
good?
couple, three
Go
that
ahead.
have come in the last 15 minutes or so. Jonas Dottel of Reutlingen, Germany says, when sending RTMP to vMix, do I need a server between that, or can vMix act as an RTMP server?
Go ahead. Do you guys have that? Go ahead,
I
Jeff.
personally never use RTMP for an ingest profile. I know it does it, but I just never use it. It's SRT or something else.
Chirag?
Yeah, I've experimented with it, and I haven't been able to get RTMP directly into vMix. So what I had to do was SRT up to Wowzer Engine, and then Wowzer Engine over to vMix. But I've been told you can do it directly, but it takes a bit of work.
Got it. Next question.
Brent Dykus in New York says, if you have multiple projects active at once and you need to make some configuration changes in real time, besides being careful, how do you label or keep track of resources so that you don't make an unintentional change?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sheets, use a Google spreadsheet and document it. We're actually doing that right now on the side. The four of us have a Google sheet that we're shared, and we're basically logging changes, IP addresses, ports, whatever happen to change. I will definitely suggest that having a sheet or some reference for managing your ports is very recommended for not only your local instances, but just your overall production in general. As you grow, especially using SRT or other UDP type sources, you will use a lot of ports, and it's very easy to get them to step on top of each other, especially if you're using different softwares to do that. And ports don't like to be shared in security groups. So definitely track it yourself. Make sure that there's no way to just scan, no easy way to just scan and say, here's all the ports that are in use. This machine's using this one, this machine's using that one. So you have to do some tracking and some follow-up yourself.
Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, develop a sheet that, and in whatever your organization method is, developing a sheet and a workflow that is consistent amongst all of your environments. Where one, research the protocols you're going to use and what common ports are in use there, and then determine for things that have variable ports, determine where you're going to put those and make that this is my best practice. This is where I put these things, and just make sure they're in one location. I have, from my IT background, I have major IP address management sheets that contain all of that information.
Next question.
Pete Wajeska in Chicago, hi Pete, says, regarding security and IP routing internal to the AWS facility and machine subnet, does each AWS account get its own respective subnet separated from everybody else in that data center, or are you sharing with other users on the same subnet?
My understanding of the way that they manage that is that you're basically inside of your own VLAN, and so you can actually have the same address space in use as another user inside of the infrastructure. It's all separated by Q tags.
Anything to add there, Jeff?
That was exactly what I was going to say, is that I actually have my VPC. For whatever reason, I started out low. So it's, I think it's the /16, so 255 addresses. And I noticed that a lot of other ones that as we're setting up other people's and working with newer ones, they're defaulting to a much larger number of IP addresses available. I like ours because I know that I'm never going to use 250 machines at once. But I did get worried one time when I had to spin up a bunch of them. I was like, do I have enough? But that's one thing, is then if you do top out, so it's a cautionary tale. All right, so if you start off with something that's only this big, and then you have to grow and scale, you then start having to go across multiple VPCs. Then you have to start writing in a transit gateway operations to be able to talk across those VPCs. it's probably better to start with a larger scale, much like Tucker did. So you may have 4,000 addresses available, but they're all yours. You can't see anybody else's traffic. So security-wise, you should be fine.
Next question.
Chad Lafarge has the last one and currently says, so Tucker, in bandwidth stats for SRT, we saw a max delay of about 60 milliseconds. So you'd use that info to drop your SRT latency down to 240 milliseconds?
That is correct.
Playing it safe, 240. Playing it dangerous, 120.
Yeah. If we're trying to make SRT do conversations, which you can do it, it's not going to be as good as WebRTC in most situations. The benefits, you kind of have to do your cost benefit on that and make sure that you understand, okay, I'm going to get a fixed latency and I'm going to get a fixed quality basically at the cost of, if they have a spike in latency or in jitter, it could possibly tear their video. And also you have that increased latency by a little bit. So conversation back and forth, you'll need to have prepped your people for. Just make sure you give people time. So you have that little pause.
That's great. Any let's see, do we have any last questions about AWS? That was a great.
We have a hangover from earlier, but it's general question.
We got a question from George here. Go ahead, George.
So this is for Tucker and Jeff. So as we move ahead, and things like obviously I take a quick look at Kiloview, and they have a new pop out that allows you. Well, no, you don't need a NDI camera. You could just use that pop to be able to put on your camera and transmit. What are our best options? I know, Tucker, you talk about mini SRT a lot. Do we try to stay with the cheaper tier of things just to practice with? Or, best practices obviously is not to jump to every piece of hardware gear because it could get expensive. What is your thoughts, or what can you share with us about, staying in this environment, hardware versus soft?
My feelings are hardware if you can afford it and buy it and it works and it fits your needs and also the quality that you're looking for, go hardware. That ASIC that's plugged, or the FPGA that's plugged inside there, that's doing the programming and doing what it's supposed to do, is going to be more stable 99% of the time, in my feeling, versus software. And this is coming from a very software oriented person, but I still like a piece of hardware when it comes to conversion.
I completely agree. I mean, I think it really is a matter of reducing variables. If you can afford to reduce the variables to where it's like having the AWS elementals, being able to say, you know what, your variables on site are, does it have power and does it have video signal? And being able to reduce those variables down so your on-site technician isn't having to deal with, well, is the software running? Is it seeing the capture card? So if you can reduce those, by all means do. There are, that being said, tons of situations where using Larix, I mean, if my kids were old enough to be doing sports right now, I would probably have Larix Broadcaster with the camera stabilization turned on in a couple of people's hands to go stream that show. And that's a fantastic workflow.
My daughter just started Little League and just gave me a good idea.
Let's talk. I'll totally do it for fun with you.
Okay, because little League game, I was glad that you decided to go back into Little League, because I actually want to do an experiment where we give all the kids IFBs, like little phone X, so you can coach them while they're out, not during the game, but during practice. You can sit there and give them individual coaching, while they're playing. I thought that'd be.
I'll provide comms too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I got another question coming in from Brody Hefner. Go ahead, Bill?
Yeah, from New York City. You mentioned that AWS can't generate a report summarizing your port assignments. What reports are available from AWS regarding your setup? Is there an Amazon machine instance report that would help you rebuild, replicate, or evaluate modifications to a particular setup?
That's a great question. I would say, I'm positive that there are systems, as far as the port assignments and things like that, I know that there are tools out there that will manage that for you as far in the IT infrastructure management space. I honestly do all of mine manually right now, just because, again, I want to know where everything is. I don't want to be troubleshooting. Did it gather all the information that I expect it to? There's also, we need to get Stan on again, because Stan probably has some tools that would really solve exactly what you're talking about.
It's great. And what's up for next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about communication inside of one VPC. So again, the VPC is effectively your network layer. So we're going to be spinning up one more instance, and we'll speed through that configuration. Honestly, those of you that are already in the infrastructure, go ahead and build that instance. It doesn't have to be the 4XL. It could be just a standard XL. That's going to be what we're going to feed NDI between that machine and our central switching machine, so the vMix machine. So we will have video transporting back and forth between those. So,
and we'll do the same thing. I think this was pretty successful of opening up the door with questions. Just burning through a whole bunch of Q&A seemed to work pretty well. I was watching the time, like, oh, if we get too long, we'll have to just cut people off. But we were able to kind of clean it all up. And so, if depending on how long the presentation is expected to be, we'll do the same thing. So the reason I bring that up is that if you're watching, the best thing when everyone's focused on it, when we know that we have people coming in on Friday, is try to build these instances. Try to do this over the next week, and then ask questions. I'm considering this a big success, because man, are we getting a lot of questions. A lot of people trying to solve a bunch of pieces, which is really, really powerful. Go ahead, Jeff.
Alex, have you built yours yet?
Not yet.
Come on,
I have a day job. It's pretty busy. I'll work on it. I'll work on it for the next week. What I wanted to do is kind of do what I used to do, which is build through it and try to build a step-by-step guide, to follow along, to build the thing out.
Yeah, Tucker did a fantastic job last week and again this week. Thank you, Tucker, for your
really, really.
I
well
love
done,
your
Tucker.
detail. I love your detail. Don't get me wrong.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. And I think that this is what we need to do to get people off the ground. And I think we're seeing more people putting it together. And obviously I do believe that this is a big part of our future. Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to say, from the point of view of somebody, I mean, we have 119 watching. Not all of them are network engineers or people are going to do this. I will never do this, but I have become so much more aware of what's behind the scenes on the internet, and it makes me feel so much more comfortable about my normal thing. Also, just talking to friends. I mean, this generalized knowledge, this is what's running the planet now in terms of communication, and basic understanding of some of these terms, I think, are going to get more and more important in time. So just thank you guys for being here, talking about this stuff, even for those of us who will never want to get in and spin up a AWS instance. It still makes me feel like more secure in the world we're moving toward.
And to be more specific, we have 175 watching. Because you have to remember, that's only concurrent, and that doesn't include the hundreds that will watch in the next day or two. So it'll be more like 500 or 600 that will enjoy it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, can we cut to Tucker's 4-up box, or do a 2-up, Mickey, or do a multi-pin so we can see what the latency is like? So just to give you guys an idea, this is going up to the cloud. Mm-hmm. So let me tap the top of my head. Mm-hmm. Tap. You guys can kind of see what's happening in gallery view. Let's instead of pinning me, can you go gallery view, and let's just see what the latency looks like, just so you guys get an idea of that whole round trip. So release the pin, Mickey. So I'll tap my head. So it's like, what, 2 seconds? Tap.
It looks faster than that.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Less
quick.
than 2 seconds?
Yeah, definitely less than 2 seconds. It's, I mean, it really feels like 800 milliseconds. Which if I had to put math on it, I'd say 800, maybe 900 milliseconds. But and again, we're not tuned for speed. We're tuned for stability right now, and it's very, very stable. So,
and we did get a couple of straggler questions in here if you want to deal with them.
Real quick.
Okay, the first one, Pocket Video School, says, I had to take a call earlier. Has anyone tried Rivet as an SRT solution, as I couldn't get a return feed from it?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Still a work in progress, but it's got a lot of potential. And it's basically that software in between the ground machine to get you SRT up to the cloud, or to an extra destination too, for that pattern.
Next question.
And Mike Grabe of Larchmont, New York, says, not sure if this was already covered, but how do you give a remote producer access to your AWS instances, and can you simultaneously monitor their activity from a separate location?
Go ahead, Jeff.
IAM is where you want to start at. So you want to create a user profile for them and restrict their restrictions down so that they're not available to do everything, such as like terminate your instances. Not that, you know, anybody you would have with you would be doing bad things, we hope, right? But protect yourself and never, ever give someone root access unless they're me or Tucker, because we may ask for it to build your system out.
Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, as far as I think of this one as less of giving them access to the AWS backend and more just like to the individual system. And in that situation, it's how does your producer need to interface with it? Is this a system being actively switched by one person, and you're trying to let your producer see that so they can give input on it? In that situation, an SRT feed or a loop around to Zoom, like what we're doing right now, where we're pitching this feed in, I could easily change that out to be the multi-view, or I could create a custom input that has just the things that they need to see so that they can call the show based on that and give feedback based on what they're seeing there. So typically it's not giving them direct access into the machine, because most producers aren't pushing buttons that at least I don't want them to be.
And that'll be week 4, right? We're going to do remote access and
remote
control. Week
control.
4.
Mhm.
I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah, never give any more access than you have to give when you're doing a live event. Like you really want to know why do you need to have that? You know, that's a big question. You know, it's not just because you trust or not trust. It is fat fingering, you know, someone accidentally just hitting something that they shouldn't, and you knowing where that's coming from. So
it's like when someone says, "Hey, you need to get in that room again? Do you want the keys to that room?" And I say, "No, I don't want the keys to that room because I don't want response." Yeah.
Just
There's
because
a lot of
I've
clients
occasionally been the Zoom host here, I'm scared of leave buttons.
Yeah. Well,
I see a big red button and I get, oh, maybe I shouldn't touch it now.
Well, people will ask me like, "Hey, can we give you our login for YouTube?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want that." Like I want manager access. I do not want that responsibility. So definitely take a look at that. Tucker, Guy, Jeff, Cherug, thank you so much for doing this. Amazing work. This is a whole new era of what we're doing here. So it's just really, really, really great work. Go ahead, Tucker.
In your playing this week, look at the lyrics options as far as for SRT feeds into your instances. That's going to be the kind of lowest friction way for you to get into playing around with it. Have lots of conversation in the cloud Discord channel. We'll talk about, you know, best test methods and things like that. So feel free to reach out there. Again, lyrics is the tools you want.
And Tucker, we'll talk. This next week I want to test lyrics with this.
Yeah.
I got some ideas. All right.
I almost put a QR code up for you to scan in today, but then I thought I'm going to have 17 people or 20 people or 111 people try.
Right. Awesome. All right. Thanks. Great questions for everyone in the audience. Just fantastic of driving the conversation forward, and great work for the panel as always. Another good day. All right. Let's jump into the post show. See you guys.